Hello. Can you tell I've cried today? Honestly, I don't know why I just like turned on the. I mean, I know why I turned on the camera, but I also was just about to start painting or drawing. I don't know. I'm having a weird day. I don't know. I like up until today or like for the last couple of days, like I don't know, Friday to yesterday, Monday. I I was in this flow state when it came to my BA thesis, and that flow state went somewhere today. And like it makes sense that it did, but yeah. So I don't know. It's just like and I'm having a hard time. Like, it's not just that I'm having a hard time transitioning from that state to the one that I'm in right now, but it's also just like the state that I'm in right now is characterized by me having a hard time because it's just I'm doing a lot. I don't know. I'm feeling a lot of grief. Um, yeah, I I have the privilege to be engaging with a lot of Indigenous perspectives on healing and trauma and liberation and embodiment and I don't even know how to talk about all of this because I just yeah I'm grieving ways of being that aren't like I mean that are here but like not enough, and I don't know. Okay, how do I maybe I did actually want to read something, but I'm not sure if that's like okay. So I'm not gonna read everything. I don't know. It feels okay, you know what? I'm just gonna read. So one of the main literary resources that I've been using for my BA thesis, which um, I'm writing about kind of yeah, like the liberatory potential of embodiment as it relates to social work and from a decolonial perspective. I don't know, just like research questions are like always a mouthful, and I don't know. um, so yeah, uh, so this book that I've been referring to a lot is called Decolonizing Pathways Towards Integrative Healing and Social Work. And they so there's one chapter um, that's called post-colonial trauma and memory work, and for all of I think for all of the chapters, they're like all the chapters are introduced via like a nonfiction story that one of the authors is telling, and it's either about kind of like it's either like a story, it's about like their own lived experience, or um Mossy, or there's or just I don't know, kind of stories about how like yeah I don't know, stories about that relate to social work, and kind of demonstrate something about their points that they're making. Like for example, there's this chapter called Confronting Professional Imperialism and Moving Towards Integrative Healing, and that chapter is introduced by a story, or with a story where they talk about how like a lack of or acknowledgement for non-Western forms of healing and understandings of wellness, often cause a lot of harm to people who are already like coming to social work or something because they need help and support, and because of professional imperialism end up getting harmed more than they're being helped. And then there's also like this chapter called post-colonial trauma and memory work, and that was the first chapter that I read of this book, and it just, and like I think I read it, I don't know, in December or January. I'm not sure, but like back then it just, or maybe even earlier, maybe November, I don't know, sometime in winter. And I had so many feelings, like I felt so, I felt so honored to read this story, to be told this story, to be led in to this wisdom and perspective, and also it just felt so much grief, and that's kind of what I keep feeling when I listen to and yeah, listen to and read, but especially like listen to, especially like in an oral context, like I was listening to the audiobook of, I think, wait, what is it called? I think it's Indigenous Trauma Work or something by Renee Linklater. I'm gonna, why am I doing this in vertical again? Well, never mind. But yeah, so I was listening to the audiobook by Renee Linklater, and they talk about kind of Indigenous perspectives on healing, and I don't know, and I just started, like, I don't know, was listening to these perspectives and understandings of how the world works, and it's just, I just yeah, it just broke me open, and yeah, I'm feeling a lot of grief and longing and confusion and like, and I don't know, just, yeah, I don't know, mostly grief in all kinds of shapes and colors, and yeah, grief in a way, like I think grief is kind of the most like accurate way I can put it, because it kind of like within the idea of grief is contained the fact that I'm grieving all the ways that I can't even say, I can't even express, like all of the things that are lost, and I'm feeling, I just feel like so much loss, and like space where like people and culture and connection should be there, and it's not. And I don't know, and before I started recording myself crying, I was watching a video by Hank Green where he talks about how, because of like AI, a lot of the time we now, like, it's not just that, like, that sometimes we think things are real that are actually AI, but like that sometimes we now see things that are real but we think they're fake. And so he talks about kind of, yeah, the kind of the problem with, yeah, he said, talked about like, yeah, like trying to figure out, like, we need new ways to like figure out what's real and what's fake, and that we need, I don't know, companies or institutions or whatever that we can trust to do that work for us or something like that. And And all I could think about was every time I listen to like 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 so much, like so often I listen to people's takes and ideas on whatever's going on, and all I can think of is this would make so much like in, and like an indigenous understanding of this issue that you're talking about would just solve so many problems, or just, I don't know. And obviously there's not just like one indigenous understanding of things, but with an indigenous perspective, or like what I'm reading, the kinds of indigenous perspectives that I'm reading and listening to, I think I think I, I think that's why I wanted to, like, I felt like kind of reading that story that's the beginning of this chapter. And yeah, I'm just going to do this, and maybe I'll just email the author and ask them for permission, or just like let them know and ask them if like they want me to take it down or whatever, you know? Okay, so I'm gonna read you this story. Michael shares a story. I, Michael, want to share an important teaching that I learned from one of our revered spiritual tribal elders. Revered, that's the word, from one of our revered spiritual tribal elders. People often think trauma only happens to humans, and perhaps to animals. But many indigenous peoples believe that trauma can become embedded in all forms of life. Trauma has been clinically defined as a deeply distressing or disturbing experience that exists along a complex spectrum affecting childhood development with lifelong emotional and physical consequences. Trauma is the result of a high level of stress that stretches beyond the mind's capacity to process new information, overwhelming the individual's ability to act and feel. Today, trauma studies, theories, and approaches such as trauma-informed care and adverse childhood experience research are widely in use within the human services professions to better understand the mechanisms of trauma and how they might be mediated and healed. I have found that within Indigenous communities, trauma has a much larger context which goes far beyond the individual and group. Indigenous peoples' traditional beliefs throughout the world have generally agreed that all things, rocks, earth, lands, plants, trees, waters, grasses, animals, and insects, are alive and sentient, and that humans have connections to them and hold obligations to each of these non-human beings and places. A conception that David Anderson has referred to as sentient ecology. While this concept is not new to Indigenous peoples, anthropologist Timothy Ingold frames these communicative relationships between humans and their environments beyond that of just knowledge, based in feeling, beyond that of just knowledge, based in feeling, consisting in the skills, sensitivities, and orientations that have developed through long experience of conducting one's life in particular environment. Studies indicate that plants possess a sentience that enables them to hear, smell, possess awareness, and respond. Does the same hold for rocks, insects, waters, and lands? Indigenous people certainly think so. Maybe, in time, non-Indigenous peoples will discover this for themselves. In the 1990s, I was working on my PhD in the School of Social Welfare at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. During the summers, my sons and I would journey from Wisconsin back to our reservation in North Dakota to spend time with my mother and father, grandparents, and our many relatives. It was also a time when my sons and I would reacquaint ourselves with our horses who were staying at my parents' farm. My father and mother both grew up around horses and used them to help with the chores on their farms and as a main source of recreation and transportation. Horses hold a special place in my family, and many of my relatives have traditional tribal names that demonstrate our connection to horses. My second oldest son, Michael, was given the name Many Horses by his grandfather, my father. My younger brother, Monty, carries the name Black Pinto Horse, which he received during a sacred ceremony. My older brother, Dennis, a military veteran from the Vietnam War era, was given the name One of Many Horses. My uncle, Leroy, my father's brother, was called Sky Horse, or Horse Above, a very sacred name. My father and many of the older men in our community spoke often of our tribal belief that horses, like dogs, were very sensitive, spiritual creatures that had the power to sense things that humans could not. One particular summer during our regular visit to my parents' farm, my second oldest son, Michael, and I received a very important traditional teaching about trauma that encompassed horses, humans, the lands, and many other non-human witnesses. We arrived at my parents' place late in the evening and made time to visit about riding our horses the next day. Oh, made time to visit. What? Sorry. We arrived at my parents' place late in the evening and made time to visit about riding our horses the next day. Then we called it a night and went to bed. The next morning I was awakened by birds singing before the sun had risen, and the smell of coffee and the early morning laughter and visiting of my family. Okay, maybe he's using the word visit in a way that I'm just not used to. So that's whatever. I went into the kitchen and poured a cup of coffee and joined them to chat on the large, covered front porch of my parents' house and to enjoy the sun rising on this warm summer morning. My sons and nephews were already dressed, geared up, and ready to go ride. As we drove down to the lands where the horses were located, we discussed what our father had told us the day before about how we must have a good sense of patience when we were reacquainting ourselves with our horses and any others that we might ride. Dad told us to proceed in a manner that was friendly, relaxed, and calm, so we didn't spook the horses or get them overly excited and make them difficult to handle. He always said to us, "Remember that horses are a lot like people. They have emotions, fears, and can easily mistrust someone that abuses them or makes them afraid. You want to make sure that your horse knows what you expect from him." Along the way, we stopped for a while to watch a mother fox and her pups trotting in the plowed dark fields, hunting mice, grasshoppers, and looking for bird nests on the ground. When we arrived at our destination, we fathers and uncles began giving our sons and nephews our unsolicited advice about what to do and how they should handle their horses, which garnered us side glances, raised eyebrows, and polite silence. After a short time, they caught the horses and began gently rubbing them down, giving them treats to chew on, and saddling them up for the ride. The horse that my son had selected was a large, impressive, muscular, roan-colored quarter horse named Swede, after Swede Johansson, the huge, formidable-looking Marine in Clint Eastwood's 1986 movie Heartbreak Ridge. The horse had been ridden many times and was relaxed and cooperating and doing all that was asked of him. After some minor alterations of his gear, my son stepped up to Swede, grabbed the saddle horn, put his left foot in the stirrup of the saddle, swung aboard, and squared himself in the saddle. Swede took a few steps and relaxed, waiting for the next cue. As he was settling himself, I hollered to Michael, "Double check your stirrup length and make sure they fit your leg length. Be sure to talk to your horse and rub his neck before you get started. Let him get used to your energy and get off and lead him around the pen for just a minute." Everything looked fine with all our riders and horses, so we all proceeded in our trucks and on horsebacks to the river for a swim. My brother and I drove ahead, looking at the beautiful green rolling hills, prairie dogs playing, and a few deer grazing upon tender summer plants just outside a tree line. All of a sudden, Sweet came barreling by without my son aboard. Shortly after, he disappeared over the hill. One of the nephews quickly rode up to us and said, "Mike got thrown. He's okay, but a little banged up. You guys go get him, and I'll catch his horse. We turned around and soon found Mike limping down the pasture road. We stopped and picked him up and asked if he was okay. I could see the hurt and worry in his eyes, but he replied, "I'm okay. What about my horse?" I pointed at my nephew Jeff, who was in the distance churning up dust as he was chasing down the horse. I said, "He should catch up with him pretty soon and bring him back." To relieve Mike's worry, I said, "Sweet was moving pretty quickly, so I'm sure he's fine." His uncle asked him what happened. "He got spooked when we were riding by that patch of trees," Mike replied. I asked him, "Was anyone else with you that might have seen anything that might have spooked him?" "No, it was just me," he said. "Their horses didn't want to go near those trees. They were all acting up when they came to that area." After we were certain Mike was okay and Jeff had successfully caught and brought back Sweet, we went back to where he was thrown to see if there were any hidden dangers the horses would have noticed and that we might have missed. We didn't find anything. That evening, after we got home and had some dinner that my mother had prepared, I grabbed a cup of coffee and sat down with my father to tell him what had happened. He sat up in his chair, leaned forward, listened quietly, and then asked if the horse and Mike were both okay and what spooked Sweet. I said we checked the area out and we didn't see anything, but all our riders told us that all of their horses got anxious and fidgety when they were near that area. My father relaxed a bit, sat back and said, "You better go see Sam and tell him what happened. Maybe there's something he could tell you." Sam was a well-known spiritual elder on a reservation. He was also our Sundance chief and medicine man, and helped to heal a lot of physical and spiritual sickness of many people on and off our res. Sam was special. He was an individual unlike most of us. He was a solitary, prayerful man who stayed very near his home and property, where he kept many ancient sacred items that he used in his healing rituals. Over the years, I had spoken a number of times to Sam and came to deeply respect his knowledge, prophecies, intuitive abilities, and kindness towards people and animals. When he was a younger man, he had raised, cared for, and ridden many horses. He had an intimate knowledge about horses and people in both a practical and spiritual sense. My father said, "He knows the ceremony that has to be done whenever someone is thrown off a horse. From what I understand, it helps to take care of whatever caused the horse to misbehave and takes away the experience from the rider so that he doesn't carry it around with him." Later on that night, I called Sam and explained what had happened and what my father had said. He told me to come to his place and to bring my son Michael with me. The next morning, we drove to Sam's house, which was a few hours away, on the other side of a reservation near the Badlands. During the drive, Michael asked a number of questions about the ceremony his grandfather would perform and what the end result might be. I had no idea, and just to make sure that my attitude or ignorance would not influence my son's thinking, I told him I had never been a part of the ceremony and didn't know what to expect. The drive was pleasant and calming as we passed through the beautiful ancient badlands where our people had once lived and at times isolated themselves on clay buttes to sit for long days of fasting and prayer. When we arrived, Sam was outside, facing the north with his back to us, standing a distance from his house, deep in prayer. We waited for a moment in our car to allow him to finish, but he turned around and signaled us over, and with his permission we stepped into the circle he was in. It was marked by long stems of sage that were interspersed with branches of cedar. As we entered his circle, he smudged us off and continued his prayers for a long, long time, talking to the clouds, winds, skies, lands, and the spirits that watch over us. We stood silently, listening carefully. When he finished praying, we gently stepped out of the circle and walked back to his house and sat down at the kitchen table. He offered us a cup of tea made from a wild prairie flower called yellow coneflower, which he had said was good for headaches and calmed a nervous stomach. We sipped the tea and talked for a while about the upcoming Sundance on our reservation and other ceremonies that would be held at different locations throughout the summer. When there was a lull in the conversation, Sam asked my son what had happened and why he thought the horse might have thrown him. Michael began sharing his story, carefully retracing the events, starting with him catching the horse, saddling him up, and riding through the area where the horse became skittish and threw him off. Sam listened carefully, and when Mike had finished telling what had happened, he asked a number of questions about the horse. What he looked like, how often he had been ridden, whether this behavior was typical for him, and any feelings that Mike may have been having at the time of the ride. Mike answered all of his queries, and finally, Sam, who had spent a lifetime understanding the dream world, asked him about any dreams that he had in the past few days. Satisfied that he had enough information, Sam said, "Let's go back outside so we can wash away what happened to Mike so that he doesn't carry it with him the next time he goes riding." As we walked back out, I could feel that the cool morning had gone into hiding, and the early afternoon temperatures had risen considerably. All the birds that were singing and the insects that were buzzing earlier that morning were now quiet. We re-entered the prayer circle that Sam had been standing in when we first arrived. He began with saying prayers to all the directions of the universe, and then started cleansing both Mike and I with a sweet grass smudge and prayed as he waved the smoke over us. When he finished, he put his hands on my son's shoulders and faced him in the direction of where the incident had occurred. He began wiping down Mike with an eagle feather and a lock of horse hair, and began singing a healing song in his tribal language as he lightly brushed his hair, eyes, face, ears, upper body, arms, back, chest, legs, and feet. When he finished, he stood behind him and put a hand on the back of his right shoulder and began a long prayer. A few tears rolled down his face as he prayed. I glanced away since his tears triggered my own tears as I suddenly realized that there were few elders left on our reservation who could do this ceremony, and one day Sam would pass, as would I, as would my son, as would the ceremony. When he was done, he stepped back and pulled a red handkerchief out of the back pocket of his dusty Levi's jeans and wiped his nose and face. Red is the color of protection. Sam said, "Let's go back to the house and sit down. Mike, I want to tell you about the ceremony we just did." He repeated that the reason for doing the ceremony was to remove the negative energy and trauma from my son, so that he would not be afraid to ride horses and that the horses would not be afraid of him. I thought we were finished, and I was going to give my thanks to Sam, and Michael was about to give his grandfather some gifts he had brought for him. Sam turned away from us and began putting away the sacred articles that he had used, and then said, "Now we have to go and wipe down the horse. You were sorry. Now we have to go and wipe down the horse you were riding to take away the trauma that happened to him. Remember, he was also part of what happened, and he needs to be cleaned off so that he doesn't carry this disturbance either." We left Sam's and continued to visit and tell stories as we drove the long distance back to our side of the reservation, to the place where the horse was corralled. At first, the horse moved away from us, appearing to be quite anxious and uneasy. I caught him and brought him over to Sam, who began talking softly to him in his traditional language and gently stroking the horse with his hand, which immediately calmed him down. He next brought out a small hand-sized braid of sweetgrass and began to lightly rub down the horse as he prayed in his language. The horse smelled the sweetgrass and nibbled on it for a moment, and then relaxed. Sam gently brushed his eyes, ears, nose, neck, and back, and continued talking to the horse. Again, I thought we were finished. Sam said, "Mike, take me to where this all happened." We drove down to the patch of trees and got off the truck. Sam walked into the center of the path that went through the trees. He looked around and then said, "Now we have to clean off this area and everything that witnessed what happened. Trauma is like a rock that is thrown into the water. It spreads itself out and can travel and get stuck in the land, trees, water, insects, leaves, rocks, and animals, all these things." Sam began talking to this place, slowly turning in a clockwise circle, acknowledging and speaking to everything he could see. He looked down and spoke to the earth, rocks and grasses, and any insects that were crawling nearby. Then he took out his smudge and began to gently wipe down some of the trees, leaves, and branches that had witnessed what had happened, and spoke to them about letting go of what they had witnessed so that they were no longer afraid and affected. A few birds were sitting in branches near where we were. Sam spoke to them about what had happened, and if they had witnessed it, or their bird relatives had witnessed it, they should let go of what they had seen and experienced. He turned his attention to the ground and began wiping down the grasses, rocks, and place where he had been standing to help them release their memory of the trauma. With his eyes closed, he stood in silence for some minutes and then said, "Okay, all done." We walked back to our truck and got in and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see the horse in the corral getting smaller and smaller. After a while, Sam said to me, "Mike, did your dad ever tell you about this ceremony?" "No," I replied. When I told my dad what happened, he just said that you and a few others still know how to do the ceremony, and that we should go and see you. We sat in silence for a while as we drove down the bumpy gravel road. Sam looked out his window and said, "Yeah, these ways are disappearing and will soon be gone. There's a lot of things that happen to the earth, the waters, and animals that we humans ignore. We focus only on ourselves, but the old people did not grow up that way. Our ancestors have always reminded us that we are connected to all things. Whatever causes harm to them causes harm to us. We feel their trauma, and they feel ours." We drove west towards the setting summer sun, and before long, we were driving silently in darkness. think I really needed to read this again, and also read it out loud. It's really weird. Like, as I said, I feel so grateful that I get to spend all of this time researching and reading, including knowledges like this. And it's also really strange to be doing this in the context of academia. Like, it feels, doesn't feel very good. And if I could, like, I don't know, I honestly, I don't think that, it's so weird because I feel like everything that I'm so kind of laboriously constructing and like formulating and citing and, blah, referencing and analyzing and blah in this thesis, in this academic writing format. I don't think any of that, like, I feel like all of that is so abstract and like useless, and I wish I could just, I don't know, like, I wish I could just make people read stories and listen to indigenous voices, because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like life is a lot more bearable. It's a lot, everything is just, I don't know, a lot less lonely. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna try and figure out if I can email the writers, the authors, and ask them, or like let them know that I wanted to read the story on the internet, and to give them a chance to make me take it down if they don't like that. Anyway, I really hope that people listen to this, and maybe I'm gonna just do this more often. I feel like all of the things that I'm saying, like, it's not like I don't have anything to say, but right now I just feel like really reading more Indigenous, reading and listening to more Indigenous perspectives and sharing them and just like amplifying them in any ways that I can, because I think that that's the way. That's how we get out of this mess, by listening to Indigenous people who have always lived in alignment with the earth and like non-human life. And I just, I don't know, I think that like Indigenous wisdoms are the most important and valuable voices to listen to right now. And yeah it's just, that's all I wanted to say. Okay.